And so the next question I had is, what is the monetary policy of Bitcoin? I've kind of already talked about this, but again, uh, to compare it to what's the monetary policy of the U.S. dollar, well, it's whatever Congress wants it to be at a given time, depending on what's happening. So they vote in a spending bill to send every American, under a certain income, $1,200 per adult, and then $500 per kid or whatever. And so everybody gets these, stimulus checks, or they bail out, certain companies or sectors of the economy by giving them money. And they do that by basically inflating the currency that we already have. They will pass a bill, the Treasury will issue a debt, and then that debt is bought by private banks but mostly by the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve, whenever they buy the debt, they just write a check from a checking account that doesn't exist and fund it. And so that's where the printing money comes in. And so that's the monetary policy of the U.S. dollar, which is just basically you can print it at will. There's really not much of a limit on how much they are willing to print.
And so for more $10 bills they put into the system, the less value that your $10 bill in your pocket has.
Right.
And
yeah.
we call it inflation. We think of it as the rise in value of that loaf of bread, but it's really that your dollar is
like
worth less at that point.
Yeah, it's a hidden tax.
But it's just simply because they're oversupplying. But
Right.
and if you really want to look at where it happens the most, again, I go back to developing countries, Venezuela, Peru, South America countries, African countries, where it goes where the people are waking up one day and they have their dollars or their pesos or whatever in their account, and they can buy that loaf of bread, but by the end of the day, they can't. And by the end of the week, they're hauling a wheelbarrow to the store to buy one thing.
The average inflation rate was around 100% per day for Zimbabwe.
Yeah, for a while. It's just unbelievable. So unlike that, though, with Bitcoin, again, predictably, exactly, there's like I think there's about 940 Bitcoin per day that are created through the mining process, and they call it Bitcoin mining just to make it relatable. It's all the work that goes into securing the network, adding the transactions to the blockchain, and distributing all that out to all the nodes all around the world. That's called the Bitcoin mining process. And through that, about 940 Bitcoin per day are created. The amount of electricity it takes to support the Bitcoin network is astronomical. You could run a small country on the amount of electricity that's used to support the Bitcoin network, and which makes it, that there's some problems, of course, with Bitcoin that I think probably will be solved at some point. And there are lots of ways you can solve the problems. But just proof of work itself, the algorithm that's used to achieve consensus, which means, and again, when I say consensus, I just mean everybody agreeing on how much money is in everybody's account. That's what that means. Bitcoin uses a proof of work consensus algorithm, which it takes a huge amount of electricity to uphold and sustain.
Basically, using the computer have to have a very powerful processor to solve an algorithm to be the person that closes the block.
Right? Yeah, so what they're doing is they'll go to a country where the electricity is relatively cheap.
Or subsidized.
They will literally, or subsidize electricity. They'll literally buy train cars, fill them full of computers that are running 24 hours a day, completely full, or warehouses, what have you. But it's sucking an enormous amount of electricity.
Yeah, right. And so you might be thinking, okay, John, you're CFO Dad, you're a banker. Aren't you talking about a technology that's going to put you out of business? Well, it's possible. It's certainly possible. But what if you were Blockbuster back in the 90s? What should you have been doing when you heard about Netflix? Should you have been putting your blinders on, pretending it's not there? Should you be, putting your head in the sand? No, you should understand it. You should, see if there are ways you can use the technology to supplement your business, to maybe even make a bridge between the legacy financial system and the future, totally digital or cryptocurrency-based system. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to understand the technology and trying to understand, just all the facets of this so that we don't have our Blockbuster moment.
The first time that you and I spoke about this, I saw it as an existential threat to banks and governments. but it really depends on how the banks approach it. It depends on, and you're seeing some of the bigger companies, J.P. Morgans and the Fidelities and some of those now that were literally, their leadership was laughing at it, calling it really bad names, and now they're devoting serious resources to it for good reasons. I don't think it's entirely because they're scared of it. I think part of it is they're scared of it. Part of it is because they see that potential that's there. So if banking in general learns about it and learns how to deal with it, for instance, how to custody,
right,
which some of them can now do, then it won't be the killer. Now, but to me, again, we tend to think of it in American-centric terms.
Right.
What it can do for America is very different than what it can. We don't have a problem with banks in America or the use of our money or buying things with money in America. That's not our issue. Right. But it is someone's issue in Central America and South America and Africa.
Absolutely.
And so there's a whole, what are we, 330-ish million people in a world of 7 billion?
Yeah.
But yet we tend to think sometimes that it's all right here. It's not. There are an enormous amount of unbanked, probably more than us, that are unbanked across the world, that this is going to change.
Yeah, right. We've got a question here. This is a great point to answer this question from Mark Livingston. He says, assume one chooses on their own volition to invest in Bitcoin. How would one do that? Is it on a stock exchange, a web page, a bank, Fidelity, etc.? Probably the easiest way, and what I would recommend for people who are new to this, is just to go to Coinbase.com and open up an account there. They're pretty much the first one in the United States to create a platform that you could buy on. And again, I'm not recommending that you do that. If you want to, though, I think that's probably the best place to go and purchase it.